Yeah. Vital information is just how we play the game. Lay the claim to every statistic. This is the mainframe for everything important is sporting on your opponents. Analyzing everything, nothing that we ain't noticed. It's a deep dive with the fantasy vibes. Made it refine. Got it all right here. It's Tyler Ghee time.
All right. Welcome on in to another episode of Vital Fantasy Football Information. My name is Tyler Ghee. Thank you all so much for stopping in, whether that be on Spotify or iTunes or Periscope, what have you. We really appreciate it. For those of you listening on Periscope, just know we do have some equipment coming in to make the sound quality a little better, so I'm looking forward to that. But anyways, let's go ahead and dive right into what we're going to be talking about this week. And this week, we're going to be talking about the Patriots backfield. That's right. The ever so disappointing Sony Michel, the reemergence of Rex Burkhead, and then James White kind of being there, but then also not being there. So just kind of trying to figure out what exactly should we do? Let's talk a little bit about each one of these players. First off, Rex Burkhead is 5'10", 215 pounds, and 29 years old. Drafted in the 6th round by Cincinnati. A little older than I guess I gave credit for Rex Burkhead. I knew he'd been in the league for a while, but did not realize he was that much of age. An elder statesman, if you will. Sony Michel is 5'11", 215 pounds, 24 years of age, and of course was drafted last year in the 1st round by the Patriots. A little surprising to see that they're ironically the same size and weight. So then I was like, what about James White? Well, James White is 5'10" as well, 205 pounds. That's a little under. He is 27 years old and drafted in the 4th round by the Patriots. James White only played, just a little heads up as I give all these stats, in 2 games. As week 3, his wife was expecting his baby, so he didn't play. There wasn't injury or anything like that. But as we read off these stats, just to kind of give you a little heads up. So what have we seen thus far out of the Patriots? What other games have we seen? Well, in the 3 games that we have seen from the Patriots, we have basically not seen Sony Michel. So far, the most leading running back they have is actually Rex Burkhead. Rex Burkhead in PPR formats has 41.2 fantasy points with 24 attempts and 112 yards with 1 touchdown on the ground. Rex Burkhead also is making a little bit of a heyday with his 17 targets and 13 receptions for 110 yards. So a little interesting there. James White, on the other end, only playing 2 games, has more fantasy points than Sony Michel playing 3 games. So that's a little concerning. He has 7 attempts, James White does, with 36 rushing yards, but 11 targets and 8 receptions and 75 yards and 1 touchdown in the air. The biggest person, though, that we're all here for, let's just get to what we're getting to, is the fact that Sony Michel has been a little underwhelming. So far, he has had 45 attempts and only 108 yards on the ground, averaging 2.4 yards per carry. Okay, just to give you some perspective, Rex Burkhead has almost had half the amount of carries as Sony Michel and has more yards on the ground than he does. On top of that, Sony Michel, we were told all offseason, hey, Sony Michel, he's going to be this awesome pass catcher. So far, how many targets has Sony Michel seen? He has seen 1 target, and he didn't catch it. It was 1 target, 0 reception. That's a little concerning, right? It's a little concerning. But let's go ahead and let's look at each one of these matchups and kind of break it down just a little bit, okay? So Rex Burkhead, through the games that he has played, they've played Pittsburgh, they've played Miami, and they've played the Jets. Not exactly awesome defenses, to be honest. Rex Burkhead got 13.5, 8.8, and then 18.9 in fantasy points, where Sony Michel had 1.4, 12.3 against Miami when he got that touchdown in, and then the Jets had 7.1. But honestly, the thing that surprised me the most, the person that surprised me the most as far as consistency goes, is James White. James White has had 13.2 against Pittsburgh and then 11.9 against Miami. And then, of course, last week, 0 because he didn't play. So let's talk about the market share of the Patriots thus far. Let's talk a little bit about what we're looking at as far as targets go. So right now, who leads the Patriots in targets? If your answer was Julian Edelman, you were correct. He has 26% of the market share, almost 27% of the market share. Followed by him is Josh Gordon. Then followed by him is Rex Burkhead with 14.66% of the market share. So it's very apparent that the person they want to throw it to seems to be Rex Burkhead and James Washington. And then, of course, we're looking at almost no percentage points for Sony Michel. So he's not even being used. But let's talk about the running game. Let's talk about who's getting the most snaps. As of right now, Sony Michel is getting 49% of the snaps. 49.44. Half the runs that come from the Patriots are coming from Sony Michel. The problem is that he's not being very productive in it. So I was like, okay, let's go ahead and look a little bit into like red zones. Red zone with the touches, red zone with the throws. Let's see where we're at with all that. Who leads in red zone targets, especially at the running back position? Thought this was a little funny. The person that actually leads the Patriots in red zone targets right now is Antonio Brown with 5, despite him only playing one game with them. The next person is Julian Edelman, Josh Gordon, both at 4, and then Rex Burkhead and James White, both at 3. So I thought that was a little interesting to see that they are getting targeted in the end zone. Sony Michel, 1 target, actually came from that end zone. So let's keep on cruising. What about the total red zone rushes? The Patriots are a great team. They're going to have some opportunity to score. Who exactly is scoring the best for them? Well, so far, the best score isn't necessarily Sony Michel, but the person that's had the most snaps within the red zone, Sony Michel. He has had 10. Rex Burkhead has only had 5, where James White has had none. What can we do? I mean, like, Sony Michel is supposed to be this amazing person. We saw him in the postseason. He looked fantastic. Last year, going into the Super Bowl, the guy was on fire. And everybody and their mother was like, Sony Michel's it. They spend a first-round draft pick. The Patriots don't spend a first-round draft pick. That's just not what they do. And then now all of a sudden we drafted him, and he's doing nothing. And so it's like, okay, what needs to happen, right? So I kind of actually wrote a paper for DLF a few months back, and I talked about, is Sony Michel the running back to own for the Patriots? Not to like toot my own horn or do a little victory lap so far, but I talked about how actually I think that Sony Michel isn't as good as we think he is. I actually kind of broke it down by points per opportunity and talked about how James White actually was more efficient. And I think one thing that we don't want to talk about with Sony Michel is last year, Sony Michel was almost non-existent during the season. He only really seemed to come out during the postseason. If it tells you anything, think about last year. Think about the finishes for Sony Michel. And I know he's a rookie, but last year, what percentage of his games did he finish below a running back 3? 62% of his games, he fell below a running back 3. That means more than half the time he was basically an unplayable asset. Well, he had some good games, right, Tyler? Sure. Top 12. How many top 12? What percentage of top 12? Now, this is last year. 23%. So, I mean, yeah, there were some big blow-ups and some not-so blow-ups. But what was really interesting was to find out that basically Sony Michel was more often than not a letdown, especially for last year. One person, though, that stood out to me last year, looking at his consistency table, what about James White? James White missed, I just said I was a little surprised by his last 2 games, 13 points and 11 points. That's solid numbers from a running back. Last year, James White threw up a top 12 running back performance 43% of the time. You know how many times he was below that running back 3? Only 12%. Actually, what we come to find out is that James White was much more solid option for the Patriots. All right, so James White is great. You know, we talked a little bit about Sony Michel and what has happened so far. We know that Sony Michel is the goal line back. We know that he's also not getting targeted, and we also know that he's being super inefficient. So let's talk a little bit about Bill Belichick, and then let's talk about what we need to do moving forward. Bill Belichick. Think about Bill Belichick. What does his average running back want? What is his first option for a running back get? Just take a guess. What do you think? What's the average fantasy outcome for Bill Belichick's running backs? The answer for that is running back 22. Bill Belichick averages a running back 22. What's even more interesting is the fact that Bill Belichick actually averages a running back 39 for his second option, which then lets us know that basically that Bill Belichick kind of uses a 2-back system. That's just kind of how he rolls. He kind of has a pass catching back mixed in with a between the tackles back. And for years, it's been kind of a James White, LeGarrette Blount, all these different kind of options. Then I was like, okay, well, let's go ahead and look at Bill Belichick's points per opportunity with the running backs that he has. Now, for those of you who don't understand what points per opportunity is, the number of points that he has divided by the number of opportunities he saw, whether it be targets or whether it be running back options. Here we go. Points per opportunity. The highest points per opportunity Bill Belichick has ever made in his entire career goes to James White. Back in 2015, James White was averaging 1.98 fantasy points per opportunity, which was a nice way of saying basically he got two fantasy points for every carry or target he ever saw. And you're like, okay, wow, that's kind of random. 2015. What about 2016? Oh, well, 2016, James White was the second person. So I kind of, scared you off a little bit. But 2016 was James White again with 1.63. Actually, out of the top 10, James White, out of points per opportunity for Bill Belichick, has 3 of them. 3 of them mattered of points per opportunity. Basically, James White has been one of the best options for fantasy per opportunity for Bill Belichick in his entire career. So, okay, we're hyping James White, right? Okay, I guess so. We're here now. So then I was like, okay, let's dig into that. Bill Belichick makes a running back average of 22. Let's dig in. What is the best running back that Bill Belichick has ever made for fantasy? Well, I'll tell you. 2018. His name was James White. Best running back he ever had. At least for fantasy purposes, he's finished as running back 7. Second was Corey Dilton. And in 2016 was LeGarrette Blount at running back 9. Well, we're just keep seeing about how efficient that James White is and just talking about how great he is. I mean, it just is crazy. So then I was like, what about targets? What about Bill Belichick with targets? What's the most amount of targets he's ever given a running back? Guess who that went to? 2018, James White with 123 targets. The second most was in 2016 to guess what? James White with 86 targets. It was kind of eerie to just see like James White keep popping up as a viable option. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'd rather have James White rather than Sony Michel. We're going to talk about what we need to do with these fantasy options. But if you're in a PPR format, and let's suppose you're in a dynasty format playing PPR, if you're not trying to go after James White, I feel like you're making a mistake. He only has about this year and one other year with the Patriots. But James White also, too, reminds me of one of those players that would probably stay at the Patriots because he understands that he's not worth tons and tons of money, but rather just a really viable option for a really good team. I could be wrong there. He could be saying he wants money and walk away from the Patriots, become very, very not useful, I suppose. But I really feel like James White keeps popping up as a main cog for Bill Belichick and also as a main fantasy option for him. Would I go out and buy James White? Sure. Am I a little worried about Sony Michel? Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit more. Let me just add in some extra little tidbits of information about Sony Michel. Sony Michel, I got this from Hayden Winks. You can follow him at Hayden Winks. PFF exclusive rankings, minimum of 20 carries, okay, has Josh Jacobs as number 1, Raheem Mostert at number 2, Le'Veon Bell at number 3, and so on and so forth. The person who is last on avoided tackles is Sony Michel with 0 avoided tackles. Brad Evans also chimes in with Sony Michel, says Sony Michel has forced 1 missed tackle in his 45 attempts. So this was later on. This was after the week 3. And then ranked an average 1.67 yards per attempt. One would also think, okay, well, the reason why this is because he's had stacked boxes. Actually, no, according to most statistics. He has ran into 8+ men in the box on only 2.2 of his carries. And then Brad Evans goes on to say, we need more Rex Burkhead. Another one, once again, Brad Evans chimes in, if not for the Pats threads, Sony Michel would only be dropped in mass. But against Pittsburgh and Miami, he forced 0 missed tackles on the 36 attempts. Just kind of reiterating what I said above from Hayden Winks. It says the only running backs lower in that stat are Devontae Freeman and Kalen Ballage. So not exactly exciting. So I tweeted out, I said, what do we do with Sony Michel? Are you trading him? Are you selling him? What do I need to do as far as all those players go? So here's what I think. I think you need to be going out and buying James White, especially if you're in a redraft and especially if you're in a dynasty. In redraft, he's going to go low because people are thinking like, okay, well, he didn't play last week. Maybe, casual players in redraft are going to think, okay, he's hurt. What's going on there? He's not hurt. He just had a baby. So he was fine. He's going to be good. If we were just going to forget about it, James White, I feel like, is the main, just stagnant person in this offense. In Dynasty, I'm seeing James White go for second-round picks, if not less. And that's kind of amazing to me, being that he's such a productive person for the Patriots. As far as Rex Burkhead, I'm also seeing in Dynasty him going for 3rd or 4th round picks. I think that's criminal, insane. Even if they're not that great, even if he is only for this year, if you're in a win now situation, a third or 4th round rookie pick just isn't much. Maybe I know I'm low on picks, but I mean, that just seems like not a lot. But the biggest question is, what do you do about Sony Michel? So trades I saw on DLF for Sony Michel. Tyler Boyd seemed to be a very popular one. Sony Michel for Tyler Boyd. Another one was Sony Michel for a second. I saw that happen. Cortland Sutton for Sony Michel. Derrick Henry. I saw Darius Geist in a second. And then, of course, I saw a 1st round pick. If I have Sony Michel, here's what I do with Sony Michel right now. I hold. Because what's going to happen is that Sony Michel is eventually going to become decent. And the reason he's going to become decent is because the dude is getting the majority of the rushing attempts within the red zone. I mean, he is. He is half the rushing attempts. And I even talk about this in my paper for DLF. I talked about how that James White was so productive in the red zone, but he was so productive not on the ground, but rather in the air. So if they want to pound it in, the Patriots want to pound it in, it's going to be on the back of Sony Michel. Here's what I would do with Sony Michel. I'd wait for him to pound in 2 of those touchdowns. Let people get a little excited. Let them come back a little bit. And at that moment, I might be willing to trade. It has nothing to do with his talent. I think Sony Michel is a good running back. I think it has everything to do with the fact that the Patriots don't really run that type of like offense. They're not going to have a bell cow. I'm sorry. This whole offseason narrative of Sony is going to be a great pass catching back and blah, blah, blah. It's just not. It's just not happening. And I don't think it will. And so then you have a question of, too, like, let's say, okay, well, I want to hold on to Sony for when he gets off the Patriots. And it's like anybody that goes off the Patriots usually isn't like a superstar afterwards. I'm just being honest. Like, they don't exactly tear it up. So I don't want to demean Sony in that fashion, but it just is what it is. What I would do is I would wait for a good game out of Sony, let people think, oh, he's back, he's going to be amazing, and then see if I could trade him off for an additional running back. I think a Kerryon Johnson, I'm not a big Geist believer, but can you also take maybe a Sony and plus and get a really good running back like a Dalvin Cook? I know it's hard because he's hot right now, and that would have to be a pretty big plus. But, kind of grab somebody that you more believe in, whether that is a Joe Mixon or a Melvin Gordon or whatever, depending on, what the player needs and stuff like that. I like Sony. I think he's a fine running back. I just don't think that he'll ever be the bell cow that we want him to be. And I think I'm a little disappointed. I think the person, though, that you do need to target if you are in PPR leagues is James White. The dude is stagnant. He's just there for Bill Belichick. And I think he can be there for your team, especially on the cheap. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Vital Fantasy Football Information. Be sure to tweet at me at Tyler Ghee NFL and tune into these periscopes and all that jazz. Like I said, I want to get the sound a little better for these. I got some equipment coming in next week. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Be sure to check me out next week. And if you have any ideas for episodes, hit me up all the time. I love hearing them. I love people chiming in and rating on iTunes. I got another rating on iTunes. Looking fantastic. Thank you all so much. I have the best listeners ever. All right, guys.